Hey there, what's going on, my loves? Welcome to 360 Self Love. I am your host, Vilma Liz, and I am so grateful to have you here today. We are officially at episode 3, which also means I will be sharing about phase 3 of my self love journey, which is actually where I currently am. Now, I want to quickly take a moment to thank you for being here and for listening to this episode. If this is your first time listening, I highly encourage you to listen to the first 2 episodes, as these are where I share about phase 1 and phase 2 of my self love journey. These 3 episodes are essentially the foundation of this podcast, and I purposely decided to start a podcast this way to give you a clear map which you may find helpful in your own journey. Whether or not you relate to the stories I have been sharing thus far, regardless of whether your self love journey has evolved in a similar manner or completely differently, what matters is that you honor where you are and show up fully and wholeheartedly as you deepen your relationship with yourself. I'm here to simply share what I've learned. My wish is that even if it's the smallest nugget of wisdom, you can take something from each of these episodes to help you get closer to yourself and realize the power within you to take charge of your health and life. There's something to learn from everything, and yet your best teacher is your own life and your own journey and your unique experiences. Phase 1 of my self love journey taught me about self care, self respect, consistency, discipline, resilience, structure. Phase 2 gave me something different but equally powerful. It taught me awareness of my inner conversation, self acknowledgement, compassion, kindness, and a new kind of self respect. Before phase 3, I was really good at awareness, but the truth is, I was still stuck in survival patterns. Exercise was a gift. It helped me learn how to regulate my nervous system in a healthier way. For the longest time, I didn't feel safe in my body. After I started experiencing panic attacks, I was always afraid of having an episode. And honestly, that fear ruled my life. But exercise helped reduce their frequency. Over time, they became less frequent, and I found it easier to get out of my head. Now, this is really key. What I've now learned is that anxiety was a symptom. So the truth is that exercise was simply treating the symptom. Oftentimes, symptoms can be the result of a pattern. In my case, that initial anxiety stemmed from a lifestyle I was living in my 20s. But that lifestyle itself was rooted in something deeper. And that's where the pattern lived. There was a part of me that was rebellious, and I kept repeating that cycle for years. Eventually, for me, some of those behaviors are what led to the panic attacks. When I abandoned the lifestyle that led to the panic attacks, I drastically cut off the part of me along with its behavior. I treated the symptom with exercise, which worked for a while, but eventually that part I had cut off, the part I had suppressed, the part I simply exiled, instead of getting curious with, resurfaced in different ways. The reason is because that rebellious part wasn't the root of the pattern. It was responding to another part of me that needed to control. Here's what the pattern looked like. There was a part of me that needed to control, which eventually caused another part of me to rebel and self abandon. The part of me that needed to control was always within me all along. And yes, it became stronger after phase 1 of my self love journey, but that part was always there. So I kept repeating the cycle of control followed by self abandonment over and over throughout my life without realizing it. For many people, this looks like going all in on their fitness or nutrition, becoming so rigid that eventually they burn out, binge, or abandon the routine altogether. This also can happen within other areas of our life, such as a career, self-development, etc. During phase 2 of my self-love journey, this was happening all the time. The controller part of me took over, and I would go back and forth between controlling and rebelling and then self abandoning. The inner critic was the voice of the controller. I was stuck in this pattern because I kept trying to manage myself so tightly that eventually the rebel in me would push back, act out in ways the controller hated, and the battle between the two would continue. Like I shared before, Phase two was where I became aware of this voice, but I still kept repeating the pattern, same behavior, same cycle. It wasn't until I stepped into phase three of my self love journey that I was able to see things much more clearly. Now, I want to quickly explain what I mean when I talk about parts. Parts is a term used in internal family systems, or IFS, a therapeutic model that suggests we all have different aspects of ourselves with their own thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and protective strategies. For example, you might have a part that wants to stay in control, a part that seeks approval, a part that avoids discomfort, or a part that rebels when things feel too restrictive. These parts aren't bad. They're often trying to help us, even when the strategies they've adopted are no longer serving us. When I entered phase three of my self love journey, I didn't know about these. I had been repeating the same cycles for years, and while I was aware of my patterns, I didn't know how to stop the cycles. All I knew were coping mechanisms to bypass my parts and their symptoms. When we bypass versions of ourselves, those parts of us don't just disappear. They find new ways to continue to do what they've always done. They find new ways to get our attention. This is why, despite all the changes I had made through exercise, healthy eating, and mindset work, I still found myself repeating the same patterns. And while those things supported my health, they weren't helping me build a relationship with the parts underneath the pattern. And this is where somatic work came in. When I first started doing somatic work, I learned to use a number of different tools to help regulate my nervous system and heal. And the more and more I did the work, I kept coming back to this one framework used in somatic healing, and this was parts work. While there are so many different frameworks and tools that are used in somatics, I found that the most helpful way to work with the patterns that were causing the dysregulation in the first place was parts work. During this phase, I've learned to accept all the versions of myself, including my parts. I've learned how to develop a more intimate relationship with myself by deepening my connection with my body in a completely new way. And I've also learned to build more self trust as I move through the process of healing and coming home to my true self. For most of my life, I thought healing meant learning to feel better, how to become a better version of myself. But what I've now learned is that healing isn't about becoming someone new, different, or better. It's about allowing our most authentic self expression to exist. And that is what I mean when I talk about your true self or your higher self. This is the version of you that existed before the conditioning of society, experiences, your environment, limiting beliefs, wounds, fears, expectations, and survival strategies. Before these parts developed to protect you. Now, hearing all of this, you might think the goal is to get rid of the parts so you can get back to your true self. But that's not how it works. The goal isn't to regulate our parts away. The goal is to create enough safety that we can stay connected to them. The goal isn't to get rid of our emotions, but rather to understand them. The goal isn't to silence the parts. The goal is to build a relationship with them. What I've learned is that many of us become incredibly skilled at managing our symptoms while never learning how to understand ourselves. We learn how to exercise away anxiety. We learn how to stay busy so we don't have to feel grief. We learn how to meditate every uncomfortable feeling into silence. We learn how to focus on productivity, self-improvement, and healthy habits while never asking the deeper questions. Who is leading at this moment? My true self or one of my parts? What is this part of me actually trying to communicate? What is it protecting? What is it afraid would happen if it stopped doing what it does? Because every part of you has a story. Every part developed a way of protecting you. At some point in your life, that strategy served a purpose. It helped you survive, feel safe, gain approval, avoid pain, or maintain a sense of control when you needed it most. The problem isn't that these parts exist. The problem is that many of us never learn how to build a relationship with them. For me, that relationship began through somatic work. Somatic work taught me something I had never learned before. It taught me attunement, the ability to slow down, to listen, to become curious, to notice what is happening inside of me without immediately trying to change it. Attunement goes beyond awareness. It's not just noticing what's there, it's learning how to honor what's there, to recognize the needs, emotions, sensations, and parts asking for our attention and respond to them with compassion rather than judgment, to stop asking, how do I get rid of this? And start asking, what is this trying to show me? And from that place, I began to understand myself in a completely different way. I began to understand what true connection with self actually meant. Awareness was simply the beginning, but attunement and regulation brought me home to myself. Again, we don't regulate so that we can get rid of our parts. We regulate so that we can stay connected to them, so we can understand them, so we can hear the voice of our true selves. And we do regulate so that we can feel safe. And at times, we may need to regulate through movement and intense breath work so we can hold the depth of our emotions because they're too much to hold in our bodies. This is what exercise was for me when I first started experiencing panic attacks and later when I lost my mom. I wasn't running away from myself during those moments. I was simply trying to feel safe within my body. So, if you are someone who is dysregulated, overwhelmed, experiencing anxiety, panic attacks, depression, grieving, reaching for tools such as exercise, breathwork, grounding, prayer, or meditation so that you can regulate and feel safe in your body is a beautiful act of self-love and honoring yourself. Once you feel safe, you work with the parts rather than stopping at the regulation and never exploring what the parts are trying to communicate. So the question becomes, do I use regulation to connect, to feel safe, or to escape and disconnect? Am I just treating the symptom without doing the inner work to get closer to myself? Most of us learn how to manage our symptoms before we learn how to understand the parts underneath of them. Exercise, breath work, meditation, healthy eating, structure, productivity, personal development. All of these things are incredibly healing and part of loving ourselves. But they can also become ways of avoiding the very thing they're meant to help us connect with. We don't regulate so we can disconnect. We regulate so we can connect. For example, you may use exercise to create enough safety and capacity to hold the weight of grief, loss, or emotional pain that feels too overwhelming to carry on your own. You might use breath work to create enough capacity to process difficult emotions rather than becoming overwhelmed by them. You might meditate to quiet the noise so that you can hear what is happening underneath. You might move your body to help your nervous system settle after a stressful day. Those are all examples of using these tools to create a more connection with yourself. But the same tools can also be used very differently. For example, you can exercise so you don't have to feel. You can stay busy so you don't have to slow down and listen. You can breathe your way through every uncomfortable emotion without ever getting curious about what it's trying to tell you. You can meditate every difficult feeling into silence. As you can see, those are very different relationships with the same tools. One brings you closer to yourself, and the other helps you avoid yourself. The question that I invite you to ask is this helping me come into a deeper relationship with myself, or is it further disconnecting me from myself? If you're stuck in cycles regulating your parts or your pain away without doing the inner work of becoming intimate with your parts, you're risking staying stuck in the same loop, repeating the same patterns over and over, escaping, and thus further moving away from your true self. Regulating practices can become a band-aid approach, a way to numb your pain and or quiet your parts. So what do? You work with the parts. And here's a simple 4-step process you can start with. This is something I've been doing myself and it's helped so much. Number 1, practice awareness. This is where you become conscious of the pattern. 2, attunement and regulation. This is where you begin to slow down, listen, and get curious, where you start noticing the parts, emotions, beliefs, and protective strategies underneath the pattern. If you're feeling dysregulated, you use tools to create safety within your body. And once you feel safe, you can stay connected to yourself and the process of working with the parts. Number 3, Integration. This is where you begin to understand your parts on a deeper level. You befriend them, build a relationship with them, and learn to work with them rather than against them. Over time, these parts begin to trust your true self to lead rather than automatically taking over. And number four, embodiment. This is where you get to live from a deeper, more authentic place where you are no longer unconsciously run by those patterns. Embodiment is not the absence of parts. It's when your parts are no longer running the show, allowing your true self to lead while staying in relationship with them. As I've shared throughout these first three episodes, my self love journey has evolved through many different phases. Through that journey, I've learned that self love is about so much more than self care, positive thinking, or healthy habits. It's about developing a deeper relationship with yourself, rooted in awareness, in compassion, curiosity, attunement, and trust. I've also learned that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering and coming home to who you already are beneath the conditioning. If this episode resonated with you and if you're feeling called to explore this work on a deeper level, I love to support you. You can learn more about my one-on-one 360 VV Method coaching in the show notes and add your name to the waitlist. Whether or not we work together, please know that I am here to support you in any way I can through this podcast, my community, my programs, or any of the content I share. My hope is that you feel supported and a little bit more connected to yourself along the way. Thank you so much for being here, for listening, and for allowing me to share this part of my journey with you. Until next time.